The house on Quarry Lane was 19 the first time I saw the house. It was the kind of place that made you second guess whether you were supposed to be there. At the time, I was working for a small-town grocery store doing late-night deliveries. The job was nothing special, just an easy way to stack up some extra cash while I figured out what I actually wanted to do with my life. That night, I had already finished a few rounds and was ready to call it quits when one last order came through. Big one too. A double bag order of frozen meals, canned goods, and a few cartons of milk. The address wasn't familiar, but it wasn't too far from the store. Maybe 10 minutes out, tucked away past a stretch of back roads. I had grown up in this town and thought I knew every street and every weird little corner, but I'd never heard of Quarry Lane. The GPS led me off the main road, down a stretch of gravel that kicked dust into the air behind my car. On both sides, the houses were old, their porch lights flickering weakly, some driveways choked by overgrown grass. But then the houses stopped. The road narrowed, framed by a thin scattering of trees, and I found myself in front of a rusted iron gate. The numbers on the plaque matched the delivery address. There was no intercom, no sign of a driveway leading further in, just the gate, slightly ajar. I pushed it open, the metal creaking loudly in the night, and drove through. The gravel path was uneven, my tires crunching over loose stones. And as I followed it, the house slowly came into view. It was smaller than I expected, a two-story cottage-style structure, the wood warped and dark with age. Its windows were shuttered, the glass reflecting nothing but the dim light from my car. No porch light, no sound, just a house sitting alone at the end of the road. I turned off the engine and stepped out. The air was still, thick in a way that made it feel like sound didn't travel properly here. I carried the bags up the short steps to the door, noting how the wood felt damp under my feet. Then, I saw it. The door was open. Not wide, but enough to show a sliver of the dark interior. I hesitated, then knocked on the frame. Silence. I knocked again. From upstairs, a voice called out, "Yeah, just bring it in." I froze. The voice was casual, like someone answering the door for a friend. But something about it felt placed, like it didn't belong to the space it was coming from. "I'll just leave it here," I said, my own voice sounding too loud in the quiet. "Nah, come on in. I'll grab it from you up here." It came from the second floor, directly above me. My eyes flicked up the stairwell just past the open door, but there was nothing to see. Just pitch black, the upper floor swallowed in shadow. My fingers tightened around the plastic bags. Every instinct in me was screaming. I didn't answer. I didn't move. Then came the sound. Not footsteps, not creaking wood. Just the faintest shift of weight, like someone adjusting themselves just out of view. I took a step back, then another. My foot hit the bottom step of the porch, and I turned, dropping the bags right there, bolting for my car. I slammed the door shut, locked it, and reversed so fast that my tires skidded on the gravel. The house disappeared into the dark as I sped back toward the gate, my heart hammering so hard I could hear it in my ears. I didn't go back to the store that night. I drove straight home, hands still gripping the wheel like I was afraid something might follow me. The next morning I checked the order records just out of curiosity. No name had been attached to it, no contact number, just an address. An address that, when I looked it up, hadn't been listed as a residence for over 30 years. The house had been abandoned since the late 80s. I don't know who or what was waiting at the top of those stairs, and I don't ever want to. I had always hated closing shifts, not because they were boring, though they usually were, but because of the emptiness. A bookstore wasn't supposed to feel unsettling, but when you were the last one left, the shelves towering around you like silent watchers, it could feel like stepping into someone else's dream or a nightmare. The store was small, tucked between a laundromat and a thrift shop that had a going out of business sign up for 3 years now. Not many people wandered, and after 8 and by 10 it was just me and the books. I worked alone most nights, shelving returns, wiping down tables in the cafe, and running out the clock until I could lock up and go home. That night, something felt off. It started small. The register had been short by a few cents, nothing unusual. Then a book I swore I had shelved kept appearing on the front counter. Twice I put it back in its place only to return and find it sitting there again. The Night Wanderer. A horror novel. I laughed it off, telling myself I must have been distracted. At 11, I did my final walkthrough. The store was still and quiet, the kind of silence that feels too thick, like it's waiting for something. As I passed the aisles, I noticed something strange. Wet footprints on the carpet leading toward the back. I stopped. They were fresh. A slow, creeping sensation crawled up my spine. The store had been locked since 8. I was the only one here, right? Swallowing hard, I followed the prints. They led past history, past sci-fi, past the horror section, until they stopped. Right at the back door. It was locked. I stood there, listening. My pulse thudded in my ears. No one spoke. No one moved. But then from the staff room nearby, I heard it. A rustling sound. I wasn't sure what I expected as I stepped inside. Maybe a raccoon had slipped in. Maybe my manager had forgotten to tell me about some weird maintenance guy working late. But there was no animal, no worker, just an envelope. It sat in the middle of the break room table. My name was scrawled across the front in red ink. My hands were shaking as I picked it up and tore it open. Inside there were photos, Polaroids. One of me is shelving books. Another of me is sitting at the counter sipping coffee. Another of me was walking through the aisles just minutes ago. And then the last one, a shot of the back of my head, taken from right behind me. I froze. The air in the room felt suddenly thick, pressing against my chest, making it hard to breathe. Someone had been there, was still there, watching. The panic hit fast. My fingers went numb, and before I could think, I grabbed my phone and bolted for the front door. I fumbled with my keys, my heart hammering so loudly I could barely hear my own breath. The police arrived in under 5 minutes. Fast, too fast, almost like they had been nearby already. They searched the store, found nothing. No sign of forced entry, no hidden doors, no way for someone to have been there without me noticing. The security cameras? Just my luck. The system had been down for 2 days. The officers took my statement, asked if I had any enemies. I didn't. I was just a bookseller, a nobody. Before they left, one officer hesitated, looking at the last Polaroid in my shaking hands. "This photo," he murmured. "This was taken tonight?" I nodded. He turned it slightly in the dim store light, squinting. "But there's something in the background." I looked again. There, in the blurred space behind me, just beyond the bookshelves, a shadowed figure. Watching. I quit 2 days later. Never went back. I don't know who left those pictures, how they got in, or why they chose me. But sometimes, late at night, I still get the feeling that someone's behind me watching. I hadn't been back to the island in years. Not since my grandfather passed. He used to bring me here every summer, teaching me how to fish, how to navigate the dense woods without a compass, and how to respect the land. I was just a kid then, trailing behind him as he told stories about the island, about its history, its secrets. But after he was gone, I never returned. Life moved forward, and the island became a thing of the past. Until last month, when I found the letter. It was tucked inside an old journal, one I hadn't touched in over a decade. The letter was from my grandfather, written the summer before he died. In it, he talked about the island, about something he left behind, something he wanted me to find. No explanation, no details, just a vague reference to unfinished business. So, here I was standing at the dock, staring at the dark water stretching toward the island. The rental boat's motor hummed beneath me as I navigated the narrow channel. The air was thick with the scent of pine and salt, and the trees rose in the distance just as I remembered. But something about the place felt different now. Not just in the way time changes things, but in a way I couldn't quite put into words. It felt off. I killed the engine near the shore, letting the boat drift the last few feet before stepping into the ankle-deep water. The sand was cool, damp. The wind barely stirred the treetops. Even the birds seemed reluctant to sing. I found the old path easily, though it was more overgrown than I expected. I followed it toward the cabin, my grandfather's cabin, the one he built with his own hands, where we'd spent so many summers. The boards on the porch were warped, the door slightly ajar. I pushed it open and stepped inside. Dust coated everything: the wooden table, the iron stove, the rocking chair by the window. It smelled like old wood and time. But outside, near the fire pit, something was wrong. The ashes were fresh. Someone had been here recently. A chill crept over my skin. This island was supposed to be empty. No one came here. I stepped outside, scanning the tree line. Nothing moved. No footprints, no sign of another boat. Still, unease settled deep in my stomach. I decided I'd only stay one night, long enough to figure out what my grandfather wanted me to find. As the sun dipped below the trees, I started a small fire, warming, a can of beans over the flames. I kept my back to the cabin, facing the woods, listening. Nothing. Then, movement, just past the trees. I stiffened, gripping the handle of my flashlight. Hello? My voice sounded too loud in the quiet. No response. I stood slowly, scanning the woods. The fire crackled behind me. My pulse thudded in my ears. Another sound, a step, deliberate, close. I lifted the flashlight and swept it across the trees. Shadows stretched between the trunks. I forced a breath and turned back toward the fire, and froze. A figure stood at the edge of the clearing, still, silent, watching. I couldn't make out their face, only the shape of their body in the dim light. They didn't move, didn't speak. Deep instinctual fear took hold of me. I forced my voice steady. "Who are you?" No response. I swallowed hard, my mind racing. Had they been here the whole time? Were they the ones who left the fire pit half-burned? Every part of me screamed to leave. Slowly, I reached for my bag, never taking my eyes off the figure. My hands trembled as I doused the fire with dirt. The air smelled like scorched wood and damp earth. I took a step back toward the dock. The figure didn't follow, didn't move at all, just stood there. I turned and walked faster. My boots crunched against the dirt path. I didn't look back until I reached the boat. The clearing was empty. I shoved off, my heart hammering as I started the motor. The engine roared to life, shattering the silence. As I steered away from the shore, I forced myself to look one last time. A shadow stood at the water's edge, watching. I never went back, and I never found what my grandfather left behind.